Welcome to Discover Barnstable, the official podcast of the Town of Barnstable, a podcast where you can meet the people who steward the programs and services that connect us to our quality of life here in the Town of Barnstable. We invite you to join the conversation as we navigate municipal government and our community pathways to help you discover Barnstable. I'm Sarah Boule Fletcher, and on this episode of Discover Barnstable, we are joined by Water Pollution Control Supervisor Andy Boule. Andy has been working for the Town of Barnstable for 15 years and is a graduate of the University of Vermont with a bachelor's degree in environmental science. Andy is also a graduate of the Suffolk Certificate in Local Government Leadership and Management program. Andy, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. So with the ongoing Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan and more home and businesses connecting to sewer, we thought it was a good time to have you in and explain how water pollution control ties into all of these and how we can all make sure those new pipes stay clear. So welcome.
Thank you.
First, let's just do a quick rundown of water pollution control for people who live in the town and are familiar. It's that big swath of land on either side of, in the middle between Bierce's Way and Pitcher's Way.
That's correct. Yeah. So there's really two major components of what we do at water pollution control. The first is the collection system and maintaining the collection system, which I think we'll get into a little bit later. But once the flow reaches the wastewater treatment plant, we have a process that's really targeting removal of biological nutrients, specifically nitrogen. So what happens when flow comes into the plant? It goes through some screening processes where we remove physical material, particles, grit, rags, debris. There's a clarification process where we remove some of the sludges that build up in that system. And then it flows into a biological treatment process, which is called an activated sludge process, which is essentially a little universe of microorganisms and bacteria that really break down all of the waste coming in and help remove nitrogen from that process. It's a cool little system. It's fun to run, and the little bugs, we call them bugs, the activated sludge, all the little microorganisms, we refer to them as bugs. The bugs actually do all the work at the treatment plant, and our job is to kind of keep them healthy and happy. And then we separate the sludge from the water, and that water gets disinfected and is then clean and discharged back into the environment. Having removed, thousands of pounds of nitrogen. I'm trying to think per day. I believe we remove about 2,000 pounds of nitrogen per year, and I'll have to check on that.
It's still a lot.
Yes.
And if anybody that's listening, is interested in learning more about this, we have done 2 other programs with you. We'll include those links in the show notes if anybody's looking to watch the videos that we've created, kind of explaining the whole process, which I think is really great. Hard to detail that on a podcast, of course. So If anybody's looking for more information on all of that you just discussed, they can find it in the show notes. So at the water pollution control, you take in sewer. I don't know what you call that,
Well, yeah, there's really 3 main things that we take in. Is the sewage coming in from the collection system that's pumped there through the town's pumping stations. We also accept septic pump outs from residents who are on septic systems. They need a place to pump their septic systems out and bring it. And we also accept grease from the restaurants in town. And they do that to essentially, we'll get into a little bit later, but they intercept the grease at the restaurant, they pump it out, and they bring it to the facility where it gets treated, and that keeps it out of the sewer system. Right.
So let's talk about why it's important to have a healthy sewer system, because there are safety concerns if there's a blockage and things like that. So keeping this brand new sewer system that we're putting into the town, why is it so important that people aren't just throwing anything and everything into the toilet?
Yeah. So when I gave the talk to the Board of Health a few weeks ago, one of the things that my favorite stat that always comes up is human life expectancy over time. And it blows my mind that maybe 120 years ago, human life expectancy was 35, 36 years for a total life expectancy for your average human. And of course, there's been advances in modern medicine, but they attribute the increase of human life expectancy to well-functioning sewer systems. So essentially taking the sewage and all the waterborne diseases that it presents and bringing them elsewhere out of the public and to a treatment plant where it'll get treated. So very generally, sewage systems really do a great job in promoting public health. But then there becomes the challenge of keeping it clean. So, we're talking a little bit about grease today. Grease can solidify in the sewer system and cause blockages, which prevents that sewage from getting brought away from the town and brought to the treatment plant. So really it's a public health issue, and getting having free flowing pipes and being able to convey that sewage is critical. And then you mentioned the safety concerns. If there is a blockage, or if we have to remove a blockage, sometimes that requires kind of dangerous confined space entries, going into areas with less than pleasant environments, with mechanical tools that are dangerous to work with. So it really is a safety concern. If we do have these blockages and the staff has to get into the sewers and remove them, it's dangerous. So, that's one of the reasons why we're really making a renewed push on grease management in town, is to make sure that we're not in that position.
Right. Something that people might not think about when they had a septic tank, they might just been like, oh, I fried some food or whatever, and now I can just, it's just going to my septic tank that's going to get pumped. I'm just going to dump the grease down the drain. But once you're on the town sewer, please don't do that.
That's right. Please.
Please, because that's the biggest part of what will cause the blockage. So one of the things that I think is funny that you talk about is the 3 Ps. The things that should go in your toilet bowl are peas, poop, and paper, and that's it. Yep,
that's correct. So what our process can handle, and what the sewer collection system can handle, is biodegradable material, things that can break down. So there's any number of things that get flushed down the toilet that shouldn't be. One of the big ones these days is wet wipes and baby wipes. People tend to think that can just get flushed down the toilet, and they do not break down. So
even if the package says flushable,
Yep. There's been some lawsuits that were filed from wastewater advocacy groups, because companies claimed that it's flushable, and flushable was defined as like it can actually go down a pipe. Whether it should is a whole different story. So they're removing a lot of those labels from the packaging, and really trying to keep those wet wipes out. What they do is they plug up pumps, so the pumps suck them up, and then they build up in the pump, and then the pump can't pump anymore. Yeah. So more dangerous work for us. We have to go down to some of these pump stations, pull the pumps out, reach into the pumps and pull the rags out and throw them away. So that's something that we would certainly like to avoid. And then other things that don't break down, there are certain types of waste, say oily waste, hazardous waste, unused medications that, if they're flushed down the toilet, they could make their way all the way to the treatment plant, and our process doesn't treat for that currently. The new processes we're building at the plant will do a little bit of a better job removing some of those things, but a lot of them will pass through the treatment plant untreated. So certainly want to make sure that unused medications are getting collected and disposed of properly, that those wipes are not going into the toilet, and dental floss, lint, you name it. All that stuff should stay out of the sewer unless it's those 3 Ps.
Right. It's funny because it's like I kind of think of your liquid waste, and then we have solid waste, which is the transfer station.
Yep.
That's where all those things should be going, to the transfer station or to your trash pickup, whatever you have.
Yep. Yeah, we're a little bit unique as a utility where, we're not like the power company or the water companies where we're providing something to somebody. We're kind of taking something from the residents in town, and that really makes us kind of have to depend on our users to do the right thing. So education's key.
Right. So, if people have grease in their home, and so we're telling them don't put it down the sink, don't put it down the toilet, whatever, what should they do?
Yep. So typical practice would be to try to collect it into a container, like an old jar that you've got, rinse it out and start to collect grease in that. Paper towels for the residue in the actual pots and pans. After you're done dumping it out, there's a little bit left, so you want to wipe that down with a paper towel and throw that in the trash. And that's generally it as far as grease goes. And then being mindful, of course, of not dumping anything else down the drain.
Right.
Those things tend to mix together, so that's kind of an ongoing problem in some of the bigger sewer systems, is where the grease is mixing with some of these wet wipes and creating essentially bricks that they call fatbergs that will completely block a pipe.
Yeah. Fatbergs, I love that. I find it interesting that because people might not even think of this, like the idea of maybe you've emptied the grease from the pan into a jar, but there's still grease residue within the pan. So taking that paper towel, wiping it out, because, one of the first science lessons I think we have in elementary school is that oil and water don't mix. You put them together, you shake it up, and then you let it sit, and they completely separate.
Yep.
So I think that's something people need to think about, is like even the littlest bit of oil is just not going to mix in.
Yep. Yeah. In a lot of cases, it's heated up, it's in liquid form, and then you dump it down the drain. It meets cold water, and then it congeals.
Yep.
And in most cases, that'll typically happen on people's private property, and before it reaches the town sewer. So it's really, it kind of creates issues on a private end first. But then some of it does make its way into the sewer system as well. So
yeah, we want to avoid that. So that brings us into grease traps, which a lot of restaurants are required to have grease traps in their facilities for this very purpose, so that they have something that collects the grease. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So we call those grease interceptors, and what it is basically a large tank that's just outside of the building that is connected only to the kitchen line. So it's really collecting any residual grease that is making it through, and it's got a little detention time when it gets out there in the tank. It meets the cold water, like I mentioned earlier, and it solidifies in this tank. And then the outlet to the tank is down below the grease level. So town code requires these to be pumped every 3 months or whenever they reach 25% full. And it's really, really helpful in keeping the grease out of the sewer system. If they're not maintained, the grease trap fills up, grease can pass through and into the sewer system. So we're really counting on our restaurant operators and owners to maintain these things really well, pump them out every 3 months. And when they're going, some restaurants go offline for, the winter, they'll close up shop, making sure that they pump those out before they close up shop, because the longer it's in there, the harder it gets to remove in the future.
Yeah. So there's you kind of have a running list of all the restaurants in town. So you kind of have an idea of who hasn't done it, and you can kind of reach out to them and be like,
Yep. The health department's been very good in including us in their restaurant permitting process. So there's a little checkbox for, is the grease trap in compliance? And within the last couple of years, they've been sending those over to us, and we've been checking out, our receipts to make sure that they have been pumping. And usually it's just a simple reminder, and the restaurants will go ahead and pump. And that's been really helpful in keeping people in compliance with town code.
Yeah. And you said you take in that grease, and what do you do with it when you get it? Because I was like, I can't imagine what you would do with that.
Yeah,
how do you...
it gets mixed with all the other residual sludges that we produce at the plant. So there's there's really 3 types of sludges at the plant. There's the septic waste that we take in, we call that septic sludge. And then there's primary sludge for the first settling tank at the plant. That's called primary sludge. And then there's the return activated sludge, the waste activated sludge, which is when we're maintaining that little universe for our microorganisms. They're reproducing, and we have to remove a certain amount of them. All that stuff gets commingled into a tank, and we dewater it and ship it off site for incineration. But it does present problems when it does get to the plant. I mean, it's kind of an inconvenient inconvenient truth, I guess, that, we do still need to handle it, but at least we're keeping it out of the sewer system. So there's a lot of preventative cleaning of our pipes and treatment of the pipes to keep the grease from, building up in the plant, in the pipes at the plant.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, but it's inconvenient, but it's necessary.
Right. So the town is making significant upgrades to the Water Pollution Control Division. So let's talk a little bit about those plans, because I know it's a very large project coming up, and it's going to benefit everybody.
Yep. It's about $100 million project. Really, there's a few major components. One of the major components is a new headworks building. That headworks building is where all of the flow to the plant comes together, and we do the screening and grit separation and odor control there. That's getting rebuilt because we need a little bit finer screening for another process that we're building, which is called a membrane bioreactor. And this is when you separate the sludge from the water. What's going on there is that it's a very fine pore membrane that filters things right down to the virus level, and essentially filters the water super fine filtration. But, keeping the grease out of that system, obviously with those fine pores, is going to be key. So that's another reason why we're trying to step up our efforts in educating the public on grease management, because we want to protect that investment. And the same goes for all of the other pipes that we're building all across town. I mean, it's a significant financial investment by the town. It's been, obviously it impacts people during construction, and it's been, it can be painful at times. So we don't want that to all be for nothing. We want to make sure that we're protecting those investments and doing what we can to, keep them flowing.
Yeah. And hopefully everyone listening today is taking something away for this, even if it's just, don't put grease down the drain. I'll take it.
Yep.
That's an important thing. So Andy, you're a first-time guest on the pod. So we have a bonus question for you. And that is, what is your favorite place in the town of Barnstable?
So we have some recently rehabilitated sludge tanks at our plant. I'd say, and I'm kind of thinking along the lines of where we have sewer and sewage pump stations. I'd say probably the area around Barnstable Harbor, Freezer Road Point, and Blish Point. It's a nice place to kind of pull into when we're doing our pump station checks, driving along the harbor and looking out at Sandy Neck. And that's probably my top one. Yeah,
it's nice. I like to go down and park at Millway and just kind of take a deep breath, reset, relax. It's a really nice view. So I agree with that. That's a good one. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And thank you to our listeners for spending time with us and listening to Discover Barnstable, the official podcast of the Town of Barnstable. We hope you found a new understanding of how your municipal government works for you and our community. Please be sure to drop us a line at podcast@town.barnstable.ma.us and let us know what you would like to learn next. Until next time, go Discover Barnstable.